Hi everybody, this is a review of our first 3 lessons in light in case you happen to not be at school for any of these. Very important to get you up with what we're doing. And this was our first lesson we did called Maths and Screens 1. And basically we had a piece of paper over here for our screen, a cardboard piece with a hole in it, and a light. And we moved the light up and down to see how the image on the screen would react to the light movement. And what we discovered in this is that the light was always opposite. When it was up, the image was down. When it was down, the image was up. And the purpose of that was to see that light travels in straight line. And because light travels in straight lines, we can draw it really accurately. And so we did this model where this opening right here coincides with the opening in this, and we found out that the light emanates from a spot called the focal point or the point source from the flashlight, which is over here. We have an infinite number of lines coming off of it, but we only need to draw 2 because only 2 lines of light define the image. And this would be, on a test, a 6-point drawing because we have 6 things that we're looking very carefully for. And the image is right here is the circle that I just drew right there. Well, the things you get points for on this is 1, 2 of the points are for using a ruler to draw those lines and having them be nice and straight. The 2 more points are for having this line touch this point right there, and for this line having touched that point. Again, we have an infinite number of light beams coming across here, but just this one and this one define our image size, and the size of the image is worth another point. In other words, it falls right exactly between our 2 outermost lines of light that can make it through the mask. And then finally, our final point is right over here for coming from a point source, meaning not off of the light bulb itself. So that was the first activity that we did. And a key part was just learning that we can draw light with these nice straight lines. The second activity we did was one's called lights, screens, and shadows. And here we used the screen again in our flashlight, but instead of using a mask, we had a little ball of clay suspended that we put in between the flashlight and the light. And once again, we drew some models, and we found that these models worked like a reverse version of the one that I just showed you. So now all of a sudden, we're not going to get a lit object here. We're going to get a shadowed object here. But we want to draw the lines that define the shape of that shadow. And they are the 2 lines again, define the size of that shadow. And they are these 2 that I'm drawing right here. Now this wasn't a 6-point drawing. It was a 7-point drawing. And 6 of the points were identical almost to the last one we did. A point for drawing nice straight lines of light like that with a ruler, a point for it touching that side of the ball, a point for it touching that side of the ball, a point for having the correct size on your shadow, and a point for coming from a point source. That's 6. The final point, and this one was crucial, was drawing in the shadow. Now, a lot of people just draw this because this is the shadow that you can see on the screen. But if you put your hand in here, the shadow hits your hand, which means everything on the backside of our ball of clay is in shadow. So all of this area, which you can't see with your eyes until you put your hand in there, that is the 7th point. But again, the point is we can draw shadows just like lit objects really accurately. Then the next one we did extended this idea of the shadows once again. This time, we took a toothpick and we set it on the table and we moved the light up and down to see how it affected the shadow on the toothpick. And what students found, we could draw. So if we do this, this is now a 4-point drawing. And the reason it's a 4-point is a little bit less stuff. We come from the light source right in the middle. We draw a line with a ruler, and it just goes over the top of this right here. And then we have all of this in shadow. Now, the shadow on the table was from here to here. We can't really see that in this drawing, but all this air is also in shadow. This is a 4-point drawing, 1 point for coming from the point source of light, 1 point for using a ruler for drawing it, 1 point for touching the top of the toothpick, and 1 point for having the shadow done correctly. And if we do this one, we draw it like this, and you can see it makes something similar but something quite different, which is important. And that it makes another triangle. It's also a 4-point drawing, but this triangle is a lot bigger and longer than this one. And the reason we did this is because we're going to start measuring altitude. And in astronomy, altitude does not work like it does most of the time you see it like in an airplane. We're not talking on altitude about the height off the ground, which is what you always hear altitude described as. So in science, we don't use this. In science, altitude is the angle off of the ground. And since these shadows draw so well, we can put a protractor on them, which is a tool you'll need, and we can actually measure the altitude of these light sources by using their shadows. And that was really the purpose of all three of these lessons, was to get us here, the idea of consistency of these triangles, and the idea that these triangles will now let us measure altitude as we do in astronomy, rather than as we do with mountains or airplanes, which is height off the ground. And we have a vocabulary word with this too that you will want to get offline, and it's got a shared picture where we basically just drew the ground like that, and we had a person standing there, and we had a moon up here that we could see. This is the horizon line. You can see these are parallel, and right there, this angle would be the altitude, whatever that is. And that was the shared picture we did. And so that hopefully gets you caught up through what we did today. You should be able to go back and do these three assignments that we did. At the very least, you should be able to make all of the drawings with it. And I suspect you could probably answer all the questions as well. So I hope that that is helpful. Thanks for watching.